Hello, I'm Liz Lumley of Finextra, and today I'm speaking to Sara Parker of VocaLink, and we're going to talk a little bit about resiliency in ATM networks. Now, especially in Britain, we've had a few really high-profile ATM network outages at banks. And one of the reasons why they were so high-profile was the speed at which the news sort of spread on social media like Twitter, and then it ends up on the evening news. So this is kind of a shock to a lot of banks, especially recently. So what have you been seeing banks have been doing to address these types of sort of reputational risks?
There are two things at play here. One is that many of the high street banks have systems which are maybe 30 or 40 years old at the core. And then what's happened is that there has been real-time systems such as mobile banking, ATMs, faster payments, for example, that have been added on, if you like, as layers around that core banking system. And it's that core system that says yes or no. Yes, you can have your money, or no, you can't. And then the other is, of course, is the rise in social media, with more than half of the population now, of the adult population, saying that they subscribe to some form of social media. And indeed, for younger people, that's way higher, like 9 out of 10. So you've got bank systems that are fairly old at their core. You've got real-time payments, real-time systems, and you've got a population that talks on social media and particularly talks if things go wrong. So
there's a certain expectation.
There is an expectation. There's an expectation that you're going to get service, and I think people, when they don't get service nowadays, are much more likely to shout about it and tell their friends about it. And then as a consequence, what happens is there is the possibility of reputational damage. Well, banks are looking at how they can invest in their IT systems. So some of these legacy systems that have been around for 30 or 40 years, the banks are addressing that. What they're also doing is that they're monitoring social media so that they can assess if there's an issue that's happening in real time so that they can address it. And also they're looking at how, as part of their innovation, they can also address some of these resiliency issues. In recent media, I noticed that banks are looking at investing an increasing amount. So I think it's 70% up in terms of their IT budgets this year compared to last, to address specifically some of these issues.
So, do you want to go into a bit more detail? You sort of laid out a lot of issues about why it's so important that banks have resilient real-time systems. What are some of the more details of what banks are doing to ensure this?
Okay, so some of the banks that we're talking to specifically to address some of these resilience issues is we're putting in place a stand-in resilience. So there are lots of reasons why a system might fail. Mm-hmm. And there's usually lots of links in the chain.
I liked how you said the different layers, sort of each layer.
Yeah, so you get, in order to get to that core yes or no decision, yes, you can have your money, or no, you can't, then often you have to go through those different links. And those may be different systems that talk to each other, or they might be via some kind of communications network. And if any one of those links goes down, well, then you don't get your answer, and therefore you don't get to use the payments system in the way that you need. Perhaps you might be left with not being able to get cash out. And there's some pretty horrible headlines that banks have had in recent years around people being stuck in fuel stations, not being able to pay for the goods and services. So really what's important is that there's things that can be done. The sorts of things that we're doing is that we're working on these resilience services, such as stand-in. So If, for example, a communications network goes down and the bank system can't talk to the ATM network that we support, then what we can do on behalf of the bank is we can authorise a transaction. We can give that yes/no answer to the bank. And obviously we would do that on the basis of having an up-to-date balance, checking PINs, and all of the normal sorts of security that the bank would do, but we would do that on their behalf.
So it would be sort of transparent to the customer. And
Absolutely, yeah. It's really important that this is completely transparent, because of course otherwise you then still get the social media storm if there are issues. So it's got to be something that just happens as a matter of course. And the way that our systems are set up is that if I try to get money out of an ATM and we're providing resilience services for that bank, if I can't get my money out of that ATM, if the transaction can't get through to get that yes/no answer, then there's a timeout that's triggered. It says, okay, I've waited too long. I'm actually going to do something automatically to try to get to that yes/no answer and provide that level of resilience. And we're talking to a number of banks about how we can implement that for them, that stand-in processing. There are some other things that we're doing which are a bit more technical, which is to do with how we can add different routes for transactions to get through across the communications network. But broadly speaking, it's about providing resilience so that that banks don't suffer from the brand reputation damage that you would get if people can't get money.
Yeah, excellent. Sara, thank you very much.
You're welcome.